So Marcellus, we got Sterling on the line. What do you want to ask him?
What do you think is some of the bad advice that you hear a lot?
I would say the one thing is when you find a good deal, the money will follow. That's true to an extent, but you just want to get one. I don't think it'll just, come out of thin air. Hey, I've got 50,000, 100,000 investing in your deal. But what I've seen more so best practice, and this is what most people don't want to hear, is that while you're finding the deal is simultaneously, you want to be building and nurturing those relationships, getting soft commitments if you can. That way, once you do have the deal, you have that money that's already there. And of course, some people may not pull through. So you want to have more in soft commitments than you actually need.
Welcome to the Diary of an Apartment Investor podcast. I'm your host, Brian Briscoe with Four Oaks Capital. I'm very excited for today's show. We got two amazing people on the line with us today. We got the Sterling White and Marcellus McKinley. So first of all, we're going to talk to Sterling. I'm going to put his bio in the show notes so that you guys can all read it. He's done a whole lot of great things in the multifamily space. So that said, Sterling, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. And I love the opener of the Sterling White. I haven't heard that before, but appreciate that. And everyone on here, definitely.
So you were someone, I listened to your podcast for quite a while, and you were somebody, in this space when I got my beginning that saw a lot of posts on social media, saw a lot of things, you got your YouTube channel and everything else. So it's been very helpful. And, I'm excited to have you on the show finally. So great turnaround here. So anyway, thank you. The Sterling White.
Yeah, and everyone on here, go ahead, get your popcorn ready because we're going to drop some bombs. We've got Marcellus on the other end, which this is his first podcast. So we'll go ahead and give him a warm welcome.
Yay. Hey, Marcellus.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, golf clap, everybody. So yeah, Marcellus, this is fun. Hopefully it's fun for you. But so that said, Sterling, go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us an idea of your background and history and what got you into real estate.
So I'll give everyone the Cliff Note, or I believe it's Spark Note version. So grew up in Indianapolis and now live in Houston, Texas, but born and raised there in the not so good parts of the city where you wouldn't want to walk your dog at night or even during the day. And Section 8 housing, welfare, food stamps, and grew up single mother, fraternal twin brother. And there was one point in time where I actually almost lost my life at 6 years old due to a stray bullet. So It was really one of those environments you never knew what if you would live the next day. But luckily I was able to get out of that environment. And then I got started in construction. This was in 2009. Shortly after that, I saw that the wealthy and rich did not get that way by being laborers in construction. So I started buying single families, bought 150, and then started buying a multifamily, and then scaled portfolio to just close to about 500 units. So that's the compact version. Of course, there's a lot to unpack there.
Oh yeah. And Cliff Notes is kind of, I think my generation, when you said Spark Notes, I made a mental note to look that up, like Spark Notes. All right, got it. So
is it Cliff Notes or is it Spark Notes? I always forget which one it is.
I always use Cliff Notes.
That's what it is. That's what I was meaning. Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
I don't think there is Spark Notes.
Back in the day, we used to go to the bookstore and buy these little yellow and black books that said Cliff Notes on them or Cliff Notes on them. But I did a lot of book reports based off of Cliff Notes. I'll tell you that. But
same here.
So yeah, a lot to unpack there. And I think were there any challenges getting into it? Looking at your background, you just said you came from a rough neighborhood, rough area. Were there any challenges going from the background that you had to getting into the single family and then later multifamily?
I would say the mindset. That was the biggest thing. I had so many limiting beliefs that were ground in me that one, and this is, we'll get to why at a later point, but that I had someone who I woke up or I saw people on a daily basis that told me I wouldn't amount to anything and be enough. So that was one limiting belief that I had, that, who am I to be able to start getting into real estate? That's only for the utmost wealthy and success and high achievers. So there was that. And then also that, hey, you have to have a large amount of capital in order to get started. So all these different limiting beliefs. But what I did, Brian, is I had this very pivotal moment in my life in early 20s that changed the trajectory of my life. And one of those things that I ended up focusing was mindset. Huge.
Yeah. Yeah, it is absolutely huge, and I think, I'm 40 something years old, I'll say I'm in my early 40s still.
Okay, fair enough.
But 20 years ago, I would look at all this mindset stuff and think that's a bunch of crap. I remember reading Think and Grow Rich, getting like a chapter and a half into it and saying, this is just dumb. But looking back now at my life, I've had some major mindset shifts that have enabled me to do more and be more. So, now as, older and wiser, that's something that I am focused on. And I realize, when I have my own limiting beliefs, every once in a while I'll say something or do something and, it's like, oh my gosh, I have a limiting belief right there. So,
and that takes a different awareness, Brian.
Yeah.
I'm getting cold chills you saying that. Most people don't realize that. But yeah, as you said it, you're like, damn, that's a limiting belief. I need to,
Yeah. I grew up in a house. Now, my childhood to your childhood, I probably looked like, the rich and famous compared to what you grew up in. I mean, my dad was a postal worker, so he didn't make a ton of money, never got shot at. Growing up, never got shot at, but I'm military, but we've definitely had people lob mortars and shoot rockets our direction. But, me growing up, I had similar limiting beliefs with money. It was just the scarcity mindset. There's only so much. Money doesn't grow on trees and things like that. And, my dad, I love him, but I think, one of the things that he has kind of an envy, or not really an envy, almost a dislike for people who are rich,
Yep.
if that makes sense. And I've noticed that recently in some of the things that I've said, talking about people who are, other side rich. And it's just like, wait a sec, I shouldn't really be thinking like this because, that's where I want to get, so anyway, lots of stuff there. Lots of stuff.
And I want to tell one quick story on how much mindset and shifts it takes. So I'm a part of Big Brothers Big Sisters. It's an organization that gives back to people that are, I'm basically a mentor to kids who came from where I came from. But the short end of the story is that I went and took my little to Kings Island, and I ended up buying a fast pass, which is a way for you to skip the line. And it was like $25 more. And I also had my business partner too, and friend, and he said, I don't know if we should pay the fast pass. I said, look, just get it. So we go to amusement park. It wasn't as effective because we just got there. They just opened. But later on, the line started getting 2 hours, 2.5 hours long for just a regular general admission. And then for us, it took 15 minutes. And that was another highlight. And I share that story because this is one concept that I learned, is that rich people buy time. That's a prime example of buying time, that people are thinking so much of that $25 or $50 or however their family is, but they don't realize the amount of time they're saving. That is buying time.
Yeah. I mean, another example, and this happened this morning, literally, my one of my kids who's at their grandparents' house mows our lawn, and, she's gone this week, so she's not around to mow the lawn. And my wife said, hey, Brian, how about mowing the lawn today? And I'm like, how about we pay somebody else to mow the lawn today? Because that's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, okay, I've got a lot of income generating activities that I could do today, or I could spend an hour mowing the lawn. I would much rather spend $25, $30, whatever the going, I don't even know what the going rate is in Idaho for mowing lawns, but I would rather spend the going rate, because I guarantee you I can make more money in that hour time frame than I will save by doing it myself.
And that's always another analogy that I use when I was on the single family side. I remember several owners that got burnt out on managing their properties. We would show up, they would be cutting their own grass. So I'm like, why are you, if you enjoy cutting grass, by all means, cut your grass. But if it's something you're doing to save money, it's just, but I'm glad you brought up that point too.
And I will say this, a lot earlier in my life, I was definitely cutting my own grass, but I did not have other income producing activities to replace it, and so, once I started realizing that, oh my goodness, I've got other things that I could do. I can start this side hustle, this and multifamily for me was a side hustle. And when I started realizing that the side hustle was going to be as lucrative as it is, all of a sudden mowing my lawn, had this rotten taste, left a rotten taste in my mouth. It's like, you know what? I'll do anything but mow that lawn today. So anyway, I've been paying for people to mow my lawn for, a good 4 years right now, and probably should have been a lot longer. Yeah.
I mean, I outsource my grocery shopping. That's one of because if you enjoy groceries, but it's just one of those things, it's just buying time. And you really just pay a little bit. You just pay, I think it was like $99 a month, or you give the person a tip. So worth it. So those are just some things that I've just learned over the years.
Yeah, a lot of things there. Definitely buy your time. And I think that's a big mindset shift that a lot of people have to go through is, do what you can to buy your time back where it makes sense. So
because you don't get it back.
Yeah. So mindset shifts, kind of enabled you to get into multifamily. Let's talk a little bit about, what you've done with multifamily so far and where you're at. And then as you talk about that, if you'd walk us through one of your properties and, the good, the bad, the ugly on that too.
Yeah. So the company that I had started in 2014 is that both my partner and I, we decided to go direct to owner on all of our deals. And this was starting in 2017, where we were going the broker route, not having much success. And instead of sitting on the sideline and saying, hey, let's go ahead and wait for let's say a correction to happen. We decided, well, let's take a pivot, because I'm a firm believer that's what entrepreneurship is about, is taking the feedback, making the pivots. And then we started going direct. And the first deal I bought was a 46 unit, bought a 50 unit, 280 units. And then the most recent was a 156 unit apartment complex, all just starting with an initial call to the owner.
Right. Now, you said, are you still in Indianapolis?
I'm in Houston, Texas now, of 3 months ago.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm in Idaho Falls as of 1 month ago, just moved from DC out here. So yeah. So how you guys doing settling down? I mean, that's takes a while.
I would say, well, it's more so myself. We didn't move the business or company. We still have holdings in Indianapolis and then also Louisville. But myself, I love it out here. It's a lot more vibrant. People are like, go, 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 go. Versus in Indianapolis, it's a different culture, more conservative, I would say, and a good place to raise a family. But I enjoy this environment more. The humidity, I am going to have to prep myself for. That's going to be deadly.
Yeah. I just did the opposite. I mean, I went from DC, which is super vibrant, to, Idaho Falls has about 100,000 people. If you start counting the surrounding, little towns, you may hit 100,000, but I went from, hot and humid DC to hot and dry. I think the humidity right now is like 20% here. I go outside for 5 minutes and I'm like, where's my water? The funny thing is, I grew up about 100 miles south of here in hot, dry. And I remember adjusting, and really disliking the humidity. But now moving back, I'm just like, water, lotion. Oh my gosh, things are super dry here. But anyway, we digress. But let's talk specifically. Pick one of those apartments that you have and tell us about it. How you found it, and like I said, good, bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, I would say that very first deal, which was the 46 unit, found it driving for dollars. At that time, driving a 2001 Honda Accord. Love Hondas. And
I do too.
So drove past the property, saw that it needed work. The signage was outdated. Parking lot looked like an alligator's back. So yeah, it needed some updating. And so this was a 46 unit apartment complex. Called the owner. So all this information is public record for anyone. And picked up the phone, asked them if they were interested in selling their property. And it just so happened to be this was their very last apartment that they were selling. And because they sold all the others, because they were shifting from being an operator to a debt collector. The property was about 60% occupied. So we were able to negotiate seller financing. And then, we put $200,000 down and bought it for $900,000. So he carried back a loan of $700,000. Nice. And then we raised additional money to take care of the improvements for that property.
All right. That seems like a lot of work for your first apartment deal. I know you did single family before. Were you into the fix and flips already, or is this like a venture into something brand new?
So I did a handful of fix and flips,
Mhm.
but not like a heavy volume. But with the
Yep.
single families is we're buying these, and I'm going to say the price of anywhere between about 15,000 to about $30,000. These were
Mhm.
C-class properties, C neighborhoods. So some people that may be in California or New York are like, you couldn't even get a piece of a land for
Oh,
that.
I know, right?
But so we would buy those for that much and then put anywhere between about 10 to 15. So we had a construction background of doing that volume, and then
Mhm.
it translated to multifamily, but it still was a different animal.
Oh yeah, yeah. And that's maybe a bite that's a little too big to swallow for a lot of people on their first one. 60% occupancy. A lot of capital expenses going in, a lot of renovations. How'd that process end up going?
So these are the trials and tribulations.
Oh yeah,
So
the
one is,
lessons learned,
and
right?
this is what I would say to everyone, is always expect the unexpected and just buffer that because it's likely to come up. It's a high probability something will come up.
Yeah.
That year we had one of the worst winters in Indianapolis, which there's no way you could have saw that coming, but
Oh
that's what
no.
we had. And so that pushed back the project timeline in which we would be able to turn the units, upgrade. So now that also trickles into our performance. So it was really like a snowball effect.
Mhm.
And then also is we went over budget as well. And
Yep.
then a boiler had went out, and then the expenses, the boilers were eating at so all these things that we ended up finding out once we got into the deal, and then we actually ended up selling it and then got a really great return to our investors from that. But we actually was in a position to where it didn't make sense for us to hold it due
Mhm.
to everything that we were experiencing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's and I think a lot of people make similar mistakes on their first one, going over budget. The unexpected for we closed on our first property October 2019, and it was going to be a light value add. We ended up not renewing a lot of leases in February and March so we could renovate units. And unexpected for us was COVID. It was just like, rental market went to zero, and we're just like, oh gosh, I guess we didn't see the writing on the wall, prior to COVID. Some people did, we didn't, but
I could go into conspiracy theory with the
you
people,
know,
right? But yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, right. There are lots of things there, but it is what it is. I mean, we after that point we had no control over a lot of things, but definitely expect the unexpected. I think is good. Have a buffer, which is a great lesson learned. When you're doing your capital expense budget, your renovation budget, build in a buffer. It doesn't have to be on every single line item, but build in a buffer. 10% or so. And same thing, have a reserve account going in. We usually put 1 month's rent, 1 month's income into an account that just sits there. So definitely have the buffers. So when you have those unexpected events, you can weather some storms. But
Yeah,
uh,
especially on the heavy value add projects.